What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another So Your Wife Wants You To. We're doing things a little bit different today, different kind of series of videos where we're using plants as medicine. I've done this for years, and I even have some that are plants what we would consider like very strong plants, sometimes considered poisonous plants, but even then I use them as medicine for certain things. I wanted to talk today about Datura. So this is a plant that typically is considered poison just because it's so strong. This is actually a member of the Datura family right here. This is Datura inoxia. And I wanted to talk about how I personally go about using plants that would be considered poison sometimes as therapeutic. I do not recommend that you do this. I've created this video specifically to as inspiration for you to learn and for you to go take classes. I have taken classes. I have professional training in anatomy and physiology, plant structure and function, human toxicology, human pharmacology, plant pharmacology, biochemistry, among others. So, and I've worked with plants for 30 plus years. So I have an understanding that some may not have, and so as such, any inspiration that you would take from this video should be, let me go and learn more. If you are somebody who is more learned and understands some of the principles that I'm talking about today, I'd love for you to just leave a comment and say hi. I don't think that anything is controversial here, other than just that caution of just make sure that you know what you're doing, and if you don't know if you know what you're doing or not, you probably don't. So enough said for that. I want to talk about Datura specifically because I use that for certain issues. I'm not even going to talk about what issues they are. I will mention the two chemicals, they're called tropane alkaloids, that are in this plant. And if you really wanted to know, you can Google those chemicals. You can see what the FDA talks about, like what the indications are for using them, and you can figure that out. But I really want to maintain focus on how I go about just kind of what the process is, and use Datura as an example, and not have this as an instruction on how to use this, because that's not what I want to do. So Paracelsus said, all things are poison, nothing is without poison, and it is only the dose that permits something to be poison or non-poison. I think that's a paraphrase, but to re-paraphrase, the dose makes the poison. If I gave you 5 pounds of sugar and said, eat all this, if I gave that to a bunch of people, half the people would die. LD50 is about 5 pounds for sugar. Obviously don't do that. But everything in a certain dose, a certain concentration, can be poison. So back to this. What makes this different is you've got kind of two things going on. You've got this leaf material, and then you've got the actual things that are going to cause a reaction inside your body, which are in that leaf material. So the question is, how much is in that leaf material, and how does that equate to what somebody, not you, but what somebody would, if I were to pick a leaf off of here, what piece of that leaf would be enough, and what amount of that leaf would be too much to put in your body, in one's body, not yours. So we're going to look at a piece of paper here. I'm going to show you how I go about that. So let's do that. And just a quick close-up first of this plant. This is actually kind of a weird specimen because it grew down and vined around, but it's happy and healthy. It's already had several blooms on it, but it's a pretty plant. You've probably seen them in much better shape than this, and they get to be huge bushes. One other point I wanted to mention is that This plant specifically is what I call a clean poison or clean acting plant. By that, I mean that it has one mechanism of action. It inhibits or antagonizes acetylcholine at the acetylcholine receptor, or muscarinic receptor site. So, some plants might, you take it in your body and it just is devastating. It shuts down certain organs and does multiple actions. The tropane alkaloids have that one action only, so it makes it really more simple to think about as far as what it's going to do to your body. So I wanted to kind of stress that point too. All right, let's take a look at that table I promised you. So when you are looking at science, you really need to look at things that are published in journals, things that are peer-reviewed, things that you really have to have a good understanding that this is good good knowledge, and it's true knowledge. You want to have you don't want to just rely on like a Facebook post or something like that. It should be hard science. This comes from a journal, and it's actually food safety, but it has its roots in agriculture, and as such it's reliable. So this is kind of interesting. It's really broken down to what species and then what part of the plant, because there's a difference between the seeds, the leaves, different species. This is actually a different variety. If you want to talk about like Datura titula, that's got a whole different variety with different numbers. We are going to be specific about Datura stramonium leaves. Yes, I know that the plant behind me is not stramonium, but I wanted to talk about stramonium. So the two alkaloids are scopolamine and hyoscyamine. They have the weight or the concentration in milligrams per kilogram. If I took one leaf, about the weight of a paper clip, I'll just take one off here, I'll show you. This obviously is not a kilo. Kilo is 2.2 pounds. We want to divide that by 1,000. This is probably more like a couple of grams or so. And we'll get to measuring. I have a microscale. We're going to get to measuring in a few minutes. But we want to divide this number by 1,000. And then the other principle that I always want to do is take your highest concentration. I don't care so much about 150, because if I rely on it being 150 and it's really 6,500, that's going to be bad. So let's always take the uppermost concentration, and we're going to divide by 1,000 because we want a gram and not 1,000 grams, which is a kilo. So that's going to be 6.5 dry weight. Also, dry weight is important too. You don't want to, this fresh, like this has got a lot of water in it, and so you want to make sure you have dry weight. And this is going to be 1.5 grams. So for every gram of dry weight of that leaf, about the weight of a paper clip, you've got 1.5 milligrams of hyoscyamine, and we're going to say 6.5 milligrams of scopolamine. All right, now what does that mean? So let's take it to the next step. Okay, so a dose of hyoscyamine, a FDA accepted level minimum dose, is 0.125 milligrams. You can go to a pharmacy, a doctor will prescribe you. The lowest amount would be a 0.125 milligram tablet. It goes up from there, but we're going to say a dose is going to be the minimum. What we're doing by assuming the maximum concentration in this leaf, and by relying on the minimum concentration of a dose, we are building in a margin of safety. It's called a margin of safety, which means I'm not going to say I want the strongest dose, and I'm not going to say I think this is the weakest. We're going to say the opposite of that. dose of scopolamine. These are all from drugs.com. I'll put links and or references in the description. This is the from drugs.com. It's a website that is science-based and talks about just different drugs. So dose of scopolamine, the smallest dose, 0.25 milligrams. So we're going to just rely on these two, the two smallest amounts. So now we know that in a dry leaf there is 1.5 milligrams of hyoscyamine. If this were a dry leaf, if this was 1 gram of dry leaf, 1.5 milligrams of hyoscyamine and 6.5 milligrams of scopolamine in a gram of dry leaf. So if I took 6.5, which is the amount of scopolamine, 6.5 milligrams of scopolamine, and divide it by the minimum dose, that means that in this 1 gram of dry leaf, there are 26 doses of scopolamine. So if I ate this, I would get 26 times the amount of scopolamine that I needed. So do you think this would be poison? Absolutely. If I had this one bit, it would be bad news bears for me. Okay, so now that we know that this is 26 times, let's divide 1,000 milligrams by 26. So 1,000 milligrams, remember, is 1 gram of leaf. We're saying that this is 26 times too much. So if I divide this into 1,000, or if I divide this into 26 pieces, that should give me the amount for one dose, right? So then you get 39 milligrams. So 39 milligrams of leaf. Let's pretend I just split this into 26 different pieces, and I only took one of the pieces. So now this would be, if this was 39 milligrams, that could be potentially a dose. But we also have scopolamine inside of here. So now let's take the scopolamine. I'm sorry, now we also have hyoscyamine in here. We still haven't accounted for that. So 1.5 milligrams in that full gram. And we know that it's 26 times too much. So now let's take this number. Where is it? There it is. So we take the 1.5 milligrams, which is the amount in a gram of dried leaf, divided by 26. That gives us 0.05 milligrams of hyoscyamine in dried leaf. What did we say a dose was? A dose was 0.125. And I'm saying that there's 0.05. So think of this. This is 5. This is 12. So I've got just under half a dose. So I got about a half a dose of hyoscyamine, which is not a lot. And I have 1 dose of scopolamine, which is that 0.25. So because the two alkaloids are both at work in the same receptor, because I care about safety, there's, remember, that margin of safety, and we also acknowledge we've taken the lowest of the doses, and we assumed the highest concentration. Remember, that leaf could have way less, but we just don't think that it has more based on science. So we can be confident that 39 milligrams could be an acceptable range. I'm not going to say it's a dose. I don't want anybody to go and take this information and try to do anything with it. But that is kind of how I get to my answers. So now do you want to go, let's go look at a microscale. I actually have a microscale. We can see what a 39 milligram amount of material looks like, just for fun. Because that's what I consider to be fun. Okay, here you see a very sensitive scale called a microscale. You can see just the wind currents from being outside on this patio. Just little tiny wind currents making a difference in the weight of things. So typically we wouldn't be out there. We want to measure, we'd be inside, where it's nice and still. Some even have like a glass case so you don't get all this variation. But we want to measure, what would we say, 39 milligrams? So that's 0.039. So let's just throw a little on here and see. Let's just see what this whole thing weighs right first. So that's 250 milligrams. So if you ate one of the, I'm not advocating anybody eat anything, but, that's a lot. So you can imagine, like, even just like cows, when they go out to pasture, if they accidentally eat a couple leaves, like, it could be a problem. All right. So that's going to be, this isn't really reliable because of the wind, so let's see if I can move locations. But that's what you're going to run into. Like, I'm not going to edit this out because that's what you run into when you're doing science. Like, you have to pay attention to stuff like that. All right, now we are in a much better space. It's still measuring probably my breath, which is like thousandths of a gram. So let's go ahead and see what we can figure out as far as, remember, 0.039. So what's this? So that's a little less than twice. Chop some off. This is actually a dried Datura leaf. 0.44. You can always be safer if you want to say, like some people might say, I'm going to do a lot less and just kind of, work up. So that's 0.25. So that would be the amount that we looked at on the papers. So it's not very much. You crush it up and you can kind of see not much at all. So anyway, that's just more for education. I definitely don't advocate you doing any of this on your own. But I have had people ask me like how I come up with stuff like this, and this is just me kind of going through what goes through my thought process in my mind and how I do things. And I only want you to use this as a means by which you go and learn more and do your own education. And if you want to start on peppermint, or things that, we talked about that margin of safety. I mean, peppermint, you eat a whole plant, you're typically fine. But just start on things that are more generally regarded as safe and, have some peppermint tea. It's pretty innocuous as long as you're not allergic to peppermint. So yeah, that's really the gist of it. Again, I just want to urge people to just pursue science and pursue things that you love. And this is what I love, so that's what I'm teaching. I have a Etsy shop called Stevo's Shelf. I'll link it in the comments where you won't find stuff like this, but I do have other things on there like lemon ointment and other stuff like that. So Stevo's Shelf on Etsy, Stevo's Shelf on Facebook is a Facebook page where I post on there. And I do some education. So on the page you'll see just blog posts and things like that. I'm also starting up a newsletter. So look for that in the comments. I don't have that started yet, but it will be soon. So just kind of keep that in mind if you want to join. Probably just be 1 or 2 times a month where I just do like an educational type thing. Just because I enjoy this. I love working with plants. So that is all. We'll catch you guys on the next one.